The power goes out. Not for an hour, not for a day, forever. The grid collapses, taking with it every thermostat, every furnace, every piece of climate control technology you've spent your entire life depending on. And here's what nobody tells you in those cozy prepper forums while you restocking canned goods and planning your bug-out bag. Your home, that fortress you thought would protect you, is about to become a death trap. Not because of looters or contaminated water or any of the dramatic things you've been preparing for. Because of something far more insidious, something written into the laws of thermodynamics that you QAnon negotiate with or shoot your way out of. Your house is going to turn into an icebox, and if you don't understand why, you won't survive the first winter. Modern homes are engineered for a world that no longer exists in a collapse scenario. They redesigned with one fundamental assumption, that energy will always be available to actively control their internal temperature. Strip that away, and you're left with a structure that's essentially a giant heat sink, bleeding warmth into the frozen void outside at a rate that would terrify you if you actually calculated it. The hidden flaw isn't that your home gets cold when the heat turns off. Everyone expects that. The hidden flaw is that modern construction principles have created buildings that are catastrophically vulnerable to passive heat loss in ways that would never occur in traditional architecture, and you've been living in one your entire life without realizing it. Let's talk physics, because sentiment doesn't keep you warm. Heat moves in three ways: conduction, convection, and radiation. Your modern home loses heat through all three simultaneously, creating a thermal hemorrhage that's almost impossible to stop without understanding exactly where your warmth is escaping. Conduction pulls heat directly through your walls, windows, and floors to the colder surfaces outside. Convection creates air currents that flush warm air out through every crack, gap, and poorly sealed joint in your structure. Radiation sends your body heat streaming toward any cold surface it can find, which in a grid-down winter is basically every surface in your home. Within hours of losing power, your house begins the process of thermal equilibrium, matching the outdoor temperature. In sub-freezing conditions, that means you're racing against a clock that's already counting down to hypothermia. The brutal truth is that modern insulation is a lie in a collapse scenario. Yes, your walls have fiberglass batting or spray foam. Yes, you might even have fancy double-pane windows. But all of that technology was designed to slow heat loss while a furnace continuously replaces what escapes. It was never meant to retain heat passively without an active heating source. The R-value of your walls that number contractors love to brag about becomes almost meaningless when you're trying to warm a space with nothing but body heat and maybe a small fire. You're not insulated for survival. You're insulated for efficiency in a powered world that no longer exists. Here's what you do, and you do it fast, because once the temperature inside drops below 50 degrees Fahrenheit, your cognitive function starts declining and you'll make mistakes that kill you. First, abandon the idea of heating your entire home. That's a fantasy born of abundance. You're going to create a survival space, one room, preferably interior, with minimal exterior walls and no windows if possible. A bedroom, a bathroom, even a large closet. This is your thermal fortress, and everything else is sacrifice. Seal every crack in your survival space with whatever you have. Towels under doors, plastic sheeting over vents, tape over outlets. You're creating an airtight envelope because convection is your enemy. Then layer your insulation inward. Blankets, clothing, cardboard, newspapers, hang them on the walls, creating an air gap between the material and the wall surface. That trapped air becomes your real insulation, not the material itself. Air is one of the best insulators known to physics, when you can keep it still. This is why traditional cold climate cultures used animal furs and layered textiles, why medieval castles had tapestries covering stone walls. They understood something we forgot: dead air space is survival. Your windows are thermal black holes even if you can't feel a draft. A single pane window loses heat at approximately 10 times the rate of an insulated wall. Cover them completely inside and outside, if you can reach them safely. Cardboard, foam board, even layers of bubble wrap create insulating air pockets. If you have any rigid insulation panels left over from construction, now is when they become more valuable than gold. Mount them directly over windows and seal the edges. You're not trying to see out anymore, you're trying to survive. Now the psychological warfare that nobody prepares you for. Humans are terrible at perceiving slow onset cold stress. We evolved to react to sudden temperature changes, not gradual cooling. By the time you feel genuinely cold, your core temperature has already dropped, your judgment is impaired, and you're making decisions that seem rational but are actually symptoms of hypothermia. This is why people in late-stage hypothermia do something called paradoxical undressing. They remove their clothing because their dying brain perceives warmth. Your mind betrays you when you need it most. You need objective temperature monitoring that doesn't rely on how you feel. If you have any battery-powered thermometers, save them for this. Check your survival space temperature 3 times a day minimum. If it drops below 50 degrees, you're in the danger zone regardless of how fine you feel. This is when you implement emergency measures. Shared body heat, vapor barrier, clothing that traps your metabolic warmth, Extreme caloric intake because your body burns fuel just generating heat. A human at rest produces roughly 100 watts of heat, same as an incandescent light bulb. In extreme cold, you can increase that to 300 watts by shivering. But shivering is an emergency measure that burns through your stored calories at an unsustainable rate. You're literally burning yourself for warmth, and once those reserves are gone, you're done. The timing of your actions matters more than the actions themselves. In the first 48 hours after collapse, everyone is scrambling, panicking, making noise. This is when you quietly seal your survival space and settle in for the long freeze. Don't waste energy trying to maintain your whole house. Don't burn through your fuel supply trying to feel comfortable. Comfortable is a luxury from the old world. Your new baseline is not dying, and that requires accepting a level of cold that would have been unthinkable before. Humans can adapt to sustained temperatures in the 50s and even 40s Fahrenheit with proper clothing, caloric intake, and psychological preparation. But you have to train your mind to accept this new reality before your body fails. Here's what kills people in the first winter: hope, the belief that power will come back soon, that help is coming, that this is temporary. So they burn their fuel fast, trying to maintain pre-collapse comfort levels. By the time they realize this is permanent, their resources are gone, and their home has become a frozen tomb. The survivors are the ones who accept the collapse immediately and act accordingly. They create thermal microenvironments, ration fuel religiously, layer clothing instead of burning wood, and defend their small warm space rather than trying to heat a cathedral. The final truth is this: your home's hidden flaw isn't structural, it's conceptual. We built homes for a world of unlimited energy, not for human survival. When that energy vanishes, the building becomes actively hostile to life. The preparation that matters isn't stockpiling heaters or generators, those are temporary solutions. The preparation that matters is understanding heat dynamics at a fundamental level and having the materials staged to transform one room of your modern icebox into an inhabitable space that can sustain human life through a winter without power. Because when the grid fails, your expensive home with its smart thermostat and zone heating becomes less protective than a medieval stone cottage with a hearth. At least they understood that warmth is something you defend, not something you assume. Preparation isn't paranoia, it's physics. And physics doesn't care about your comfort or your hope or your belief that someone will save you. It just is. Learn it now, or freeze later. Those are your only options.